Hello and welcome to our continuing series of Venable Legends, where today I'm joined by firm chairman Jim Shea, who led the firm through tremendous growth in the Venable Studios on Pratt Street in downtown Baltimore. Jim joined the firm in 1983. He led the firm as our managing partner from 1994 to 2006. He became chairman of the firm in 2017. During that time, he led the firm to one of national prominence from one of regional prominence, opening offices in New York City in 2005, LA in 2006, in San Francisco in 2013. But it wasn't just geographic expansion. The firm also grew in revenue, profits per partner, the depth and breadth of all of our practices. Jim was also a noted trial lawyer, a member of the American College of Trial Lawyers, steward to some of the firm's most important clients, and active in the community, chair of the Board of Regents at the University of Maryland System, the Downtown Partnership, Empower Baltimore Management Corporation, and the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. He also served as a board member of the GBC, the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, the Mercantile Bank Shares and Mercantile Bank and Trust, and the Equal Justice Council of Maryland Legal Aid. Jim took a leave of absence running for governor, and then when he ultimately retired from the firm, became the city solicitor for Mayor Brandon Scott, whom he mentored and chose as a running mate. Jim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I'm asking to sort of start off these interviews a fundamental question, which probably most of us who are lawyers think about from time to time. What was it that made you want to be a lawyer?
Well, my grandfather, my mother's father, with whom we lived when I was 10 and 11 years old, was a prominent trial lawyer. He also was a politician. He had been president of the Maryland Senate, but retired from the Senate in the late 40s to concentrate on his practice. At the end of his career, he became a circuit court judge, 1959, I think. He was appointed to the circuit court for Baltimore County. And it was at that point that we were living with him for reasons that aren't relevant. He was not well, but went in every day as a jurist. And he would occasionally take me with him. And on non-jury days, I would sit in the jury box, which of course would be empty on non-jury day. And I watched him preside over a variety of trials. I still remember a number of them to this day. So I was steeped in the law, and he was a wonderful man. And I said, well, I'm going to be a lawyer. That was when I was 10 or 11 years old.
So I know that you attended college at Princeton, the University of Virginia Law School, and then clerked. Could you walk us through, please, the evolution of your career?
Well, I did. I went to Virginia, and I enjoyed it. It was a good law school and a very pleasant place to go to law school. When I finished at Virginia, I clerked for Judge Young. A lot of my jobs emanated from what I did in the summers as a college student and then as a law student. I was a tennis pro, not a great player. I was good enough, but I was a teaching pro, and I taught a lot of people who were at Venable and other law firms in town and their families. And Judge Young was one of those. So I had a little bit of an inside track. He hired me, I think after some considerable thought, he decided to hire me, and I clerked for him for a year. And then I had to choose what law firm. Really, I guess in a way, had chosen it when I took a summer associate's job, ended my tennis career, and took a summer associate's job after my second year in law school. And I was intent on being a trial lawyer. That's what my grandfather and my great-grandfather and my uncle were all trial lawyers. And they believed, and I believe to this day, that to be a trial lawyer, you gotta know how to try a case. So I selected a firm where I thought I'd get early trial experience, which I did. I had 3 jury trials within my first year and a half on my own, and tried a good number of cases at Sems, Bowen and Sems, which was a terrific trial firm. Judge Norman Ramsey was there, John Mudd, a lot of really, really top flight trial lawyers. But after 2 years, I was a king of torts. I did auto accident cases. That's why I had so many jury trials. After a couple of years of that, and I counted, my last count, I had 200 files in my file cabinets of different cases, and that was so much that I couldn't be ready in any of them, or couldn't be ready in all of them, and I had no idea which ones were going to go to trial. So it was a very stressful job, and I decided to go briefly into public service. I went into the Maryland Attorney General's office, which at that point was headed by Steve Sachs, who was one of the Maryland's greatest lawyers, wonderful man. And he had as his deputy one Paul Strain, who had been at Venable, made partner early at Venable, and himself had gone off to become Deputy Attorney General for the state of Maryland, and I got to know Paul. Coincidentally, Paul had also clerked for Judge Young, so although we were different in ages, that was another connection I had. So I served for 2 years and tried a bunch more cases in the Attorney General's office, and not so much through Paul's insistence, but certainly by his example, I thought Venable would be a good place to go. And at this point, I had been practicing now 4.5, 5 years, and I had a good number. I probably had 20 jury trials by this time. So I went on to Venable, although Venable's litigation group was not known for the frequency of trials, but I figured I could learn, and I could try cases when they came up, and so I went to Venable, and Paul followed later. He came back to Venable, and the two of us together then began to work in the litigation department and bring in cases and change the whole tenor of Venable's trial group, litigation group, into trial lawyers, because Paul tried a lot of cases too. So I lived on as a litigator at Venable. I was fairly quickly recruited to be on the hiring committee, and I became chairman of the Associates Committee in 1984. No, I was chair roughly mid-'80s. I can't remember exactly when, and served there for 10 years. By the time Civiletti had become managing partner, and the firm asked me to be managing partner in the 94. I think you had the year right then. And then from then on, from 94 through 2017, I served first as managing partner and then as chairman. The duties, frankly, didn't change, but the title did. And I served until 2017 as chairman. All through that time, I tried cases. I tried a good number of cases at Venable. Then decided to run for governor, and the rest of it's not really evolution of my career. I lost badly in the primary, but I had a running mate, Brandon Scott, who lost with me, obviously, but he then went on to become mayor and asked me to be his city solicitor, which I did for 2 years, and then have gone on to continue practicing law now out in Towson with my oldest son's firm, Royston, Muller, McLean and Reed. And that's the full story. Longer probably than you wanted, but
not at all. But there's some details that may be
and a
lost.
long time. It took a long time to do all that.
Sure. Some details may be lost on some of our listeners. The first is that Judge Young was a U.S. District Court judge for the District of Maryland.
Oh, that's true, yes.
A very well-respected and impressive jurist. And I am curious where you were a tennis pro.
I was a tennis pro at Larendale, which was a very, very good tennis facility. We had 20 clay courts and a very big membership and a lot of good players.
and I know many of our colleagues are members there now, and some of the law clubs that we
Probably
belong
are.
to meet there. So it's highlighting the small town nature of Baltimore.
True.
So you've had many matters on which you've worked and many roles at the firm. Is there a matter or particular effort about which you're most proud, or was your favorite?
Well, there were a lot of different cases, and I was obviously devoted to all of them. I guess the one case that stands out for me occurred in the early 2000s. My memory on the years is a little fuzzy, but it was right in the middle of my tenure as managing partner. And I represented a group of owners of the Atlanta Hawks, and actually the Atlanta Thrashers, the hockey team, and the arena in Atlanta, the Phillips Arena that the teams played in. And there was a fight for the ownership between the group I represented. It was led by a man named Bruce Levin from Montgomery County. And they were fighting with a group from Boston as to who would control the team. And actually, we got the case. I got the case after a summary judgment had been granted against my clients. So we took it up to the Court of Appeals and got it reversed, and it came back, and we tried the case. It was a good 2 or 3 week trial in Montgomery County Circuit Court, and we won. I wouldn't tell the story if we hadn't won. But it was a good success. Mitch Mervis was invaluable. He really was the glue that kept the case together. He told me what to do, and I went into court and did it.
So Mitch's name has come up a couple of times
Right.
in the course of these discussions, and I hope to have a chance to sit down with him. What an
You should.
important part of the firm's story he represents
Right.
in so many ways.
Yes,
Um,
he's a terrific lawyer.
So in the course of your career, obviously the legal profession has changed enormously. What are the ways that you reflect upon as being the most dramatic?
Well, I guess there are some things that aren't so good. The bar has gotten much bigger. It's much more divisive. It's much more money driven, all of which obviously I think are not good results. The bar is so big that you don't run into the same lawyers over and over again, and I think that's given some people license to behave poorly. In the old days, you ran to the same group, and if you acted badly in one case, they got you in the next case, but now it's so spread out. The focus on money has been rough. I don't think the law profession's unique. I think the whole society has decided that you're not worth anything unless you make a lot of money. And that has driven the rates up enormously, which has meant that a simple case can't be tried unless it's worth, frankly, in today's world, unless it's worth 8 figures. It's not worth the client's money to go to trial. So each case is grander, more complicated, more expensive. The fees are up. The lawyers in the firm are focused on how much money they're making. They always have been, but now it's to a greater degree. So all of those things I think are rough. At the same time, practicing law is a wonderful intellectual challenge. It's a wonderful exercise in human psychology, where you meet great clients and you're opposing people who are opponents that you have to deal with and find their weakness and exploit it. And that's all still really good. I had a lawyer back at SEMS, one of my early mentors, who told me, as he described cases over and over again, his client was always the poor dumb bastard. He needed help. The plaintiff, the opponent, he did defense work on the civil side. The plaintiff was always a lying son of a bitch. And that was the way the world was broken down. The poor dumb bastard that we represented and the lying son of a bitch who we opposed, and what it showed was that particular mentor's devotion to his client and his unwillingness to accept any form of defeat, and that's still a big part of the practice.
And it strikes me that one part of it, as you sit here remembering your mentor's lessons, is that part of the profession is enduring as well. That there are mentors who still take time with young lawyers. And from afar, one of the relationships that has struck me as really defining for the firm, and this was not something that I've prepared you for at all, but was your relationship with Ben Civiletti, and the way the two of you were able to so ably guide the firm in special kind of ways. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about
Sure,
that
okay.
relationship.
Yeah, well, Ben was managing partner, became managing partner after a very unfortunate episode, which I hope you don't document in your history. But the firm got sued as the state went through a crisis with savings and loans. Now, as it turned out, although the allegations were horrible, nobody at Venable ever was reprimanded in even the mildest way by the Bar Association. But it was a rough period. Ben became managing partner, and I think many people credit him as sort of a wartime leader who grabbed the firm by the scruff of the neck and pulled it out of that abyss. He had a lot of help. Paul Strain and Alan Yarborough, Jim Wright, Stuart Webb, and others were wonderful assistants, but Ben was a leader and pulled the firm out of that. I was associate committee chairman under Ben, and I became managing partner as a result of a strategic planning effort that Ben had made me part of. I don't think Ben at that point intended for me to become managing partner, but he was willing to take the consequences of the group that he started. So there I was. I became managing partner. And at that point, Ben was chairman. And our relationship was always said to be very close. And in a lot of ways it was. We got along very well. But Ben didn't interfere. He was a delegator. He was good at picking people to do certain jobs and then let them do the jobs. And so I went about my business, and frankly, Ben didn't spend any time telling me what to do. I didn't spend a lot of time going to ask him what to do, but I kept him posted, and he was satisfied with the progress we were making. He would occasionally chide me about, oh, that new innovative idea didn't work out so well, did it, type thing. But we got along fine, and had a very easy, I think, productive relationship.
What about your professional life makes you most proud?
Well, as it turned out, although I was devoted to my clients and I wanted to be a practicing lawyer, not a law firm administrator, my role as managing partner and then chairman had me recruit and attempt to develop a lot of young lawyers. And I think the best thing that happened to me was a series of multiple blossoming of these fine young people into tremendous lawyers. And today, when I think back or even look at the roster of Venable lawyers, there are so many that I recruited, I talked into coming here, and watched them grow. And frankly, they give me credit today where I don't deserve any. They grew because they were spectacular. One young lawyer, and I won't say who it was, came over from another firm. I recruited him. He was a young business corporate lawyer. And he came over. He thought he was going to have, he was fairly young, but new partner level. He thought he was going to have a lot of clients come with him. And he got here, and the clients were wrestled away from him by his prior firm, and he was despondent. He said to me, I'm not bringing all the clients that I thought I was. And I said, I used his name, and I won't repeat it. I said, we didn't hire you for your clients. We hired you for you. we want you to practice here. And he shrugged his shoulder and said, all right, well, I'll give it a shot. And he was a tremendous addition to the firm, and has done very well, and frankly is still doing very well. But that was just one of many stories. I think that's what makes me the happiest when I think back of my career.
Do you have, outside of that, a separate favorite Venable story?
I do. These are hard to pull out because there's so many stories. The ones I like to think about are mostly funny. Jim Wright has told me many stories over the years about his own efforts, and a lawyer is now deceased. Is a very fine lawyer, Harvey Clapp, sort of a famous, infamous, I might say, venerable lawyer, but a wonderful sense of humor and a very bright, effective person. So I won't tell any of Jim Wright's stories. You get him on these interviews and get him to tell some. But I'll tell you one that occurred, and it's a demonstration as to how one's practice evolves. Particularly for a trial lawyer, but I think for everybody. You go from one thing to another. You try to make the next best decision. And I had come back to Venable, as I've described, and my good friend Paul Strain followed. And we were sitting in an office in the old building one day, and Doug Khanna, partner now retired, still living, but retired, Doug came around and caught us together in the office and said, would you two like to make a pitch for a big set of IUD cases that are pending in the Maryland Federal Court? The client, G.D. Searle, wants to change lawyers. The cases are in midstream. This was in November of a year. They were to go to trial, 23 cases consolidated, were to go to trial in March in Baltimore Federal Court. And would you two like to make a pitch for it? And I looked at Paul, and Paul looked at me, and we said, sure. And Doug said, okay, well, here's the file. There wasn't much in the file. He says, the meeting's next week. And he left us. And Paul looked at me, and I looked at Paul, and he said, what's an IUD? And I said, Paul, I don't have the vaguest idea, but we'll figure it out. And at this point, I had 4 children, and he had 6. But we didn't know what an IUD was. But we'll figure it out. And we got on it. And by March, we were ready for trial. Paul was the primary trial lawyer in that case. Elizabeth Honeywell helped them, and I was an assistant of sorts. And Paul won those cases and became the leading IUD lawyer in the nation. And there were a bunch of suits all over the country. He and Elizabeth went to Minnesota and tried one that lasted all summer, from before Memorial Day until after Labor Day. Horrible situation with a very adverse judge and a very aggressive, effective set of plaintiffs' lawyers. Paul performed magnificently and ended up with the largest, not just IUD, but pharmaceutical practice of anybody in the country. And it all started that day when neither of us had the vaguest idea what an IUD was, but we were going to defend the manufacturer of the product. We did. And Paul went on to great glory, and I benefited as well from it.
Well, Jim, I could spend all day chatting with you about these sorts of things, and maybe we'll reconvene for a longer discussion. But let's leave with the final question, and that is, if you had one piece of advice for young lawyers, what would it be?
Well, I think the piece of advice would be to grab that opportunity that comes your way. Again, make reference to this story about the pharmaceutical practice. You get a chance to do something, say yes and do it, even if you think it's beyond your capabilities, even if it's about something that you don't know anything about. All the young lawyers of today are very well, beautifully trained to take a set of facts and a bunch of principles called the law, put them together, and make them work for a client. So that would be my advice, to seize those opportunities that come your way. And then the price you pay is you got to work really hard. It's not a profession where you can be successful by sitting in a dark room somewhere and thinking great thoughts. You got to work every day, real hard.
Well, Jim, you're generous with your time, and we are grateful for it. And stay tuned for our next episode of Venable Legends, right from the Venable Studio, Pratt Street, Baltimore.
Well, thank you, Chuck.